What got you to move to from Michigan to Los Angeles? How did that all take place?
Well, I went to University of Michigan and I went to school for film and screenwriting. So I just came out here. I was always going to come out to California for a little bit because I was born in 29 Palms, but I never lived out here. And then Hollywood, obviously, because the film industry is out here. So I did that first. So I came out here, I worked at a CAA, and then I worked at for a TV show in the writer's room. And then I did feature film development. And then I got my agent with my screenwriting partner, went out with a bunch of scripts, pitched a lot of movies, made not very much money. And then then I made some films with my husband and then had kids. And then after I had kids, I decided I wanted to write books because that's what I went to school for originally, but got totally distracted by film. And then now I'm kind of doing a hybrid of both. So, which maybe is good for what we're talking. I'm not sure what we're talking about. So I realized I just agreed to come on.
No. That's kind of the way the show goes. And
Okay.
a lot of people who have been on it, it just turns into a really good conversation and it just kind of sprouts. And that's the fun part about it. Like,
Okay.
even that's why I kind of just, everybody who's been on it, like I hit record right away and I'm just like, wherever it goes, we're going to find out information. We're going to have fun. And something is
Mhm.
always uncovered behind it.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like what you were just saying, like you wanted to make books first, then you got drifted into the film industry. Like, how did that like distraction kind of come about? I'm really
Well,
curious about that.
well, that's college, So basically, I wanted to write like the great American novel. I went to University of Michigan to write, maybe be a journalist, be a lawyer. Um, and then my one friend just kept showing me his screenplays because he was taking screenwriting classes. And I'm like, I never really was, I liked movies. I never really thought about working in film. And I kept giving him notes on his scripts. And finally, I was like, I'm going to take one of these screenwriting classes because I feel like I can write one of these. I maybe thought I could write one better than him. Maybe that's
I would
possibly what,
say that.
yeah. And I was like, hey, if he's writing these screenplays, I can write these screenplays. And so I took a class there and it was an excellent class. And we all had to write a script and I loved it. I just kind of got hooked on it. It was kind of a great combination to me of like poetry and prose, like, because it was shorter and more, it's just, and it just really vibed with me the way it worked. And then I liked the concept of collaborating, which also
Mhm.
then probably brought me to comics. But I just like the idea of writing something and then having other creative people get involved in it and then take it somewhere new. And so I do like that component of filmmaking, which is probably how I got the bug for it and kept writing. So
And I love that, that analogy there. Of just it's kind of like poetry, and I've always felt that even when writing comics, the way you have to like just drip in the right captions and drip in the right words and balloons, and also like when you're writing your descriptions to either whoever's gonna be reading the script or your artist, it really is like a love letter. Like you're really trying to make something super clear and vivid. And I don't know how you write your scripts. Do you even write your comic scripts very similar to your film scripts? I would assume.
well, I I do and I don't. Like I will adapt an old script to a comic, which is a little harder for me just because,
Mhm.
there is a difference. And if I get too stuck in the way I wrote it as a screenplay, it will not play as a comic because you just show different things visually. And you can only do so much with action and space in a comic that you can do more. You just can do things differently with space. And so I do write them differently. I strangely enough used a dark horse format to write scripts when I first tried to do it, and now I've just kind of stuck with that just because that's out of habit. I don't know if that's the best one. I am kind of more, so I do kind of follow that script format, which is just like describing the panels, doing the
Mhm.
the normal thing. So yeah. Unfortunately, I
Like,
don't write it like poetry. It doesn't look like poetry, but
no,
I think of
never.
it. I feel like it that I used to like be a bad poet in college, so I like it reminded me of that, just like dropping the right little bit of something to get the point across. So yeah.
And you're like unveiling something a lot when you're telling stories, especially in scripts and in comic book
Hmm.
scripts. So just like poetry, just like slowly peeling back stuff and like, yeah, I get what you mean. It never like actually comes out looking like poetry, but like in your head, the way you're kind of, finding the right beats, especially when you're doing
Yeah.
panel to panel stuff. And even with, film work, I was dabbling when I, just like you, just like in college, I was like, either prose is going to take off, comics are going to take off, or my film stuff is going to take off. And I
Hmm.
really felt like my film stuff was going there for a minute because stuff was about to hit development. And then
Yeah.
my whole life changed. And then all of a sudden comics just skyrocketed. And it was like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'm doing this. Like it's a really cool thing. But like, when we're talking about like the poetry aspect, it's so interesting because when you're finding beats and even within film scripts and you're trying to find the motion, like every page is supposed to be like a minute long
Mhm.
per, on each film
Yeah.
script. And in comics, you're just like, if I transpose that, it's impossible
Yeah.
because I could have, a huge action, like, variable movements in one description on a film script. And guess what? That's like a whole half or full page on a comic script. So
Mhm.
therefore, it's already been deconstructed in that sense. Like, and when you're talking about visuals being different, what do you incorporate differently visually in a film that you wouldn't do in a comic?
Well, I mean, the things I like to do I'm a big fan of the establishing shot,
Mhm.
both in comics and in film. So I think those translate really well. I think a lot of times, when you're doing a conversation, I mean, action is going to be totally different because you're going to cut in film. You are going to cut, like if you're in a fight sequence or you're in an action sequence, you're going to cut from the most dynamic part of those fights, and show little sections of it. And that's going to be similar in comics, but you're not going to be able to show the complete fight sequence in a comic, whereas in a film, you could do a one shot of a whole fight and that's really exciting. But to try to do that in a comic would be crazy. It just wouldn't translate. I mean, maybe someone's done it, but it just wouldn't, I don't think it would translate well. Like you need to like pick like the right kick, the right
Mhm.
reaction and everything like that. And I feel like at some level I'm still like learning that, not learning it but getting better at it each time I do it, because I'll go through a script and be like, oh, this is the old Jessica writing this. Like I have more skills now at comic writing, because comics are relatively new only 5 years for me, so it's been a
Mhm.
relatively new endeavor. So I'm still
Yeah.
like honing that.
That's such a good example too. Just like,
Yeah.
yeah, one shot could get a whole fight sequence. When I think of
Yeah.
like the movie They Live and that
Hmm.
ridiculously long, like 3 minute like fist
Yeah.
fight scene. And it's just like it literally is like one or two cameras. And you're like, okay, I get like what they put in the script here and how it plays out. But you're right. If that was in a comic book format, I mean, the most you'd want that to take up is like 2 pages, and
Yeah,
even
because
then it's
you're
like, it's extensive, like it's a
yeah.
bit over the top. And if you have a comic that's just nothing but a fight scene or a fist fight, the way that kind of no,
No. Yeah,
it's just not
it's
gonna
like
work.
a little flip book. You're like
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a great way to do something like that. That's a
Yeah.
brilliant way to show a fight. But yeah, like I couldn't imagine that at all. That's so cool. I'd actually and when I talk to filmmakers and even some of my filmmaker collaborators, like Kai Brown, she
Mhm.
does film and everything. I think that's the craziest thing when I start editing their scripts is like I really have to go in depth edits and get the red pin out and go
Yeah.
over them because of those movements. I always see filmmakers, and it's a hard thing to do in comics is like
Yeah.
one action, a singular action per panel. And that just gets real difficult. And I always
Yeah.
feel like filmmakers always, you're allowed so much freedom and room to breathe. And then you're just so tightly constrained when you switch over.
Bring your comic books to life and print your comics with comics will spread.